But the bottom line is that this is what is being taught, in that the Islamic State concept is not being divorced. It's still being advocated, and countries like America that are based on allegiance to a nation state that isn't based in a single religious book, but rather based in a constitution and Bill of Rights is not. So I'm concerned about nationalism issues in these schools. I'm concerned about Sharia law issues. I've seen apologetics about Islamic history, and it's not being taught in context, but rather being taught as some type of utopia. All of these things need reform, need new textbooks, need courage, and this isn't to say that all Islamic education is this way. There's a lot of, especially in the Sufi traditions, there's a lot of non-political 21st century thought out there, and it's very challenging.
Thank you.
Extremely brave man, and thank you for sharing your views with us. I have a number of Muslim friends, some Wahhabis that I care deeply about, and I've never heard any of this really articulated before. So my question is, can you tell us more about your organization, how we can tap into that, how we can access information, and maybe share with Muslim groups in our states about what you're doing? That
would be great, because that's really our biggest challenge, is that the paradigm of okay, if you say, okay, I want a Muslim opinion, or I want Muslims to help us, you go to the yellow pages and you look up under Islamic or Muslim, and you find organizations labeled as that. But if you truly believe in the ideas we put forth, the separation of that, you don't put forth an identity of being Muslim in American society. You do it through your professional organizations, through chambers of commerce, etc. So it needs networking to help build organizations. Our website is AIFdemocracy.org, AIFdemocracy.org. We basically are trying to build a strong membership of Muslims and non-Muslims that can help us get the word out about what we're doing, create opportunities for engagement and discussion, whether it's through speaking at universities, speaking at churches, synagogues, mosques. One of the points we make, though, is every community we go to, we try to engage some of the larger mosques in the area. We did this when we went to Columbus in Ohio. We did it when we went to Alabama. And in many of the different communities we go to, we engage the mosques to try to have these discussions. And I say try because the problem is that's not grassroots. This is a grassroots problem, because the grassroots of the Muslim community agree, I think, with most of what I've been saying. The leadership, the imams, have a problem in that they're in denial, and they don't want to address some of the issues because it would take away their power structure. Sounds like the problem with the Church of England in the 14th and 15th century. Very similar. So we're looking to build coalitions with different Muslim organizations. Ours, that's a little different, is that we are ideologically based, and that we truly believe that there needs to be a movement of separating mosque and state. That is our mission, is to help Muslims join in an ideology and a movement to separate mosque and state. So ultimately our antagonists become political Islamists or groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and others. But we think that we will not allow the mosques to become the domain of the Islamists, though political Islam actually in its movement now has been a product of the last 100 years, really. It's been an opposite reaction to secular dictatorships in the Middle East. And if you look at Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna and many of these theologians that fed into Al-Qaeda, they are really a product of Egyptian dictatorship, Syrian dictatorship, Iraqi dictatorship. So you cannot have the Middle East go through a reformation without a democracy or liberty movement. But democracy by itself is not going to be a solution either, because elections, as we see with Hamas or in Iran or elsewhere, elections can usher in a oppression by the majority. And you need a movement for liberty. So one of the things AIFD is doing is a Muslim Liberty Project. And we reserved the URL, but ultimately we're going to roll that out in the next year, which is to create, just like the Brotherhood created a little pamphlet by Sayyid Qutb that became the manual milestones, we want to create our own milestones about how Muslims can engage in the ideas of liberty and believe in the ideas of Hayek and Bastiat and Hobbes and Locke and Jeffersonian democracy and still be Muslims and love their faith, but not be wedded to Muslim collectivization. And that's really what is the fuel for political Islam, is Muslim collectivization. Because actually it's interesting, in Arabic, the word for faith community, which is ummah, is the exact same word for nation. So until you can actually separate the meanings of those words and say we're going to reform ummah as a nation but keep the Muslim community, you're going to continue to hear responses that are somehow that I'm anti-Muslim.
Before we take another question, I want to ask Dr. Jasser to explain a little bit more about the separation of mosque and state as it relates to the U.S. Constitution and Sharia and personal Sharia law versus, and political Islam, just to help people understand a little bit more about what that means.
Yeah. That's a great question, because as easy as it seems to me, sometimes it's a hard concept for people to get their arms around in what we mean. I'm not talking about taking away any rights from Muslims to be politically active as a group, because that's one of the responses I get from Muslims is, well, there's Christian activists, there's Jewish activists, there's Baha'i activists, there's all faiths have their activist components. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is still, at the end of the day, our state legislatures and our federal government, when you argue law, it's based on reason. It's not based on trying to figure out what Scripture meant. It's not based on scriptural exegesis, which is really the way Islamist argumentation is. They don't argue law. For example, in an Islamic state, alcohol would be prohibited for Muslims. This is seen in Malaysia just last weekend. If you look at the news reports, there's somebody in Malaysia that was a woman that was arrested for drinking beer publicly. The Christians in Malaysia, Muslims are only 60% of the population. Non-Muslims in Malaysia are free to drink. It's only applied to Muslims. So to me as a Muslim, what I tell 12-year-olds, just like what my father told me, I've never drank alcohol personally. But my dad never said, you can't drink or I'll hit you with a stick or whatever. He told me, Zuhdi, these are the reasons why the Quran, I believe, tells you not to drink. And he rationalized with me, and I decided that that was something I believed in, because I believed that I wanted to have control of my faculties at all time. And it was a rational argument I made. Now, in my legal thought, I'm more libertarian in my sense, and I think that if you want people to follow an idea, it's better to educate them than to force them to do it. And that's why we had a period in this country where alcohol was prohibited, and it wasn't very successful. So usually when you give people freedom, they will rebel, and sometimes even though they know that's not the best thing for them. So I think similarly, the separation of mosque and state, it's very important. I think to me, the solution for radical Islam is going to come from America, is because what makes us unique from Europe is that we are a country under God. This is a country that celebrates immigrants, and it celebrates religion, and it celebrates the public display of religion. But we also have that wall of separation in the First Amendment. And I think that that wall of separation is very important and taught me that I can get closer to God when I have free choice to practice or not practice. Now in Islam, how do we separate that? There's Sharia. I've got books of Sharia at home that tell me how to do ablution before prayer, that tell me, just like in Orthodox Judaism, that you have all these rules and technical things related to tradition, related to how to fast, when not to fast, what to do when you're traveling, what to do regarding marital laws and things that are related to family issues. Books and books. Do I agree with all of it? No. I pick and choose the ones that make sense to me, and others I may choose not to. But those are personal things that God tells Muslims what to do in government. It doesn't. Actually the word Sharia you won't even find in the Quran. So to me, that's also a sign that God left those things to people to decide among themselves.